Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of the Coach's Corner here in Four Lads Had a Dream. I'm delighted to be joined with Kevin Thomson tonight. Thanks for coming on, Kev.
Yeah, no bother. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, just to get back to the start, as they say, mate, an old podcast, well, coaching journey for yourself begins in a kind of transition moment at Hibs back in 2016, is that right?
It was. I'd signed, I think I'd left Dundee and went back to Hibs. And obviously that next step was probably on the horizon for me sooner rather than later. I'd been given the opportunity to, under Alan Stubbs, to obviously do a wee bit in the academy, which was something that I was obviously really keen to do, really eager to get involved. And I was still obviously a first team player, training every day, trying to obviously contribute as much as I could to the team. But that opportunity to come back in at night time for, I think I maybe done like 2 nights a week. Off the top of my head, Lee Maker was the manager at the time. He was the under 15s manager, who was great. He gave me kind of an opportunity to get involved, and I think Eddie May was the head of the academy at the time. So just to, like I suppose any older player that's coming to the end of their career, to get that opportunity. Obviously I know the club like the back of my hand, and I knew some of the young players as well. So it was probably the natural step for me, and it was great that they allowed me to be involved.
So how did you find that transition then, mate, when obviously you're still a player as well, but you're balancing coaching within it?
I think it was tough. It was, listen, you obviously you're paid to be a player. I think when you get to the age that I was when I first had a wee obviously insight into it, I knew the end was near, but I never faltered my focus to want to be the best player I possibly could every day, and I was willing enough to probably sacrifice a wee bit of time with my young kids in the house to kind of get early dinner and head back into the academy when obviously the kids are finishing school and coming back in, and that was invaluable for me. It was something that I was keen to do. I always felt I had the natural kind of personality to be a coach one day, to be a manager. So I was keen to think about kind of life after football, and obviously if you've been involved in it, if it's your life, it's sometimes the natural progression. Some players don't have the patience for it. I would rather do something else, whether it be media or a total different line of work. But it was something that I was always, dead keen on and really passionate about. And Hibs obviously gave me that great opportunity, which I relished. I loved working with players. I still actually keep in contact with some of the ones that I got in my first group, which ended up being some of the first kids that come in my academy, which was obviously a wee bit further down the line. So it's amazing what things can come if you want to put yourself out there, and it was probably that case for me.
Just out of curiosity, who did you have in your group? Anybody that's went on to kick on?
So they were a real strong group at the time, Hibs. They were a 2001 group, and they were really strong. Boys like Craig Henderson, he's one in question that obviously keep in contact. He was probably I think the first kid that I'd done a 1-to-1 with within my academy. They were part of the performance school that brought in him and a boy called Liam Evans, who his auntie and uncle stay in my street. So I'd already got to know him a wee bit through giving him a wee bit of advice, because he was a pro academy kid. He'd been at Hearts, and maybe game time was lacking, and I'd been asked obviously a couple of questions over the years to kind of offer my advice, and these boys ended up, not Liam, he was obviously still at Hearts at the time, but he was friends with a boy called Craig Henderson, who ended up going and playing in the lower divisions. He's probably not kicked on as much as he probably would have, but one that was a really good player, and another one was Gregor Wood, who ended up leaving Hibs and ended up going to Rangers for a small period of time. He was, I don't know if he was quite signed player, but he was certainly in at Rangers on trial. So they were a great group, brilliant to work with. And I suppose like any coach, young coach, you want to hopefully work with a group that maybe gives you that wee bit of opportunity to learn and maybe not getting thrown in at the deep end. And that was certainly my thought process. It was a perfect age for me to try and build up a relationship with the lads, get them believing in you, get to try and build up that relationship with parents that might see some value in obviously what you offer. And obviously I was dead keen to try and grab that with both hands.
Yeah. And then obviously you have a return to Auckland Howie in the summer of 2018. How did that role dovetail at that point with developing your own academy?
I think the natural thing, I suppose, for starting my own academy was just how passionate about kind of youth development that I've been. I've got 2 young boys that I suppose have got the same dream that I had when I was a kid. Whether they ever achieve their goals is yet to be seen. But I think, like any other parent, you try and support them, and it's great that these young kids have dreams. And I was just a young lad brought up in Peebles that had unbelievably supportive parents to give me the best opportunities that I could. And thankfully, obviously, I'm sitting here that had the career that I had. But and I also know that how cutthroat the game is, and how tough it can be, and so many fall short of their dreams, which is just the harsh reality of life. But no, I think it dovetailed well in the respect that it gave me an opportunity to go back to a club that I love, obviously, one that's been really good to me. I suppose when I left as a player, you'd never ever feel you'd have that opportunity to go back. But when I got that opportunity, I think the 20s job had come, which I think it might have been called the development team at the time. I'd been on holiday. I'd heard that the job was up. I can't think off the top of my head who had messaged me to say that would be perfect for me. So I'd reached out to Graham Parks and said, listen, I'm on holiday. I hear there's a job within the academy. I'd like, if it's possible, to kind of put a good word in for me. I never really knew who Craig Mulholland was at the time. Obviously, off the back of that conversation with Graham, he had said to me that Craig Mulholland was in charge, and I'll do everything I obviously can, and I'll put a good word in for you. So I'd been asked to put my CV forward, and I got a reply off of Craig to say that at that given time the development squad job was probably not for me, which was fine. It was I suppose it was the start of the kind of, not rejection, I think that's probably the wrong word, but knowing how difficult it is to try and create a path as a young coach. And it was one of the ones that'll be lump in the back of your throat when the email comes back through, disappointment. But listen, I've been there a million times as a player, so you soon get over it. And I think, I don't even know how long before that was, before I had then, off the top of my head, I can't quite remember how I ended up meeting Craig and a boy called Craig Robertson, who obviously you'll know because he was part of the club. I got brought up in a similar area to Craig. We went to school, albeit he was a couple of years older than me. So I'd had an opportunity to meet Craig, and obviously Craig, the two Craigs had come through to Edinburgh, and I'd sat and had coffee and some lunch with him at Starbucks just nearby. And they obviously sold the kind of academy on me and opportunities that might be there for me. And it kind of felt like a no-brainer. A difficult role to start with, being involved with under 13s, maybe a wee bit younger than I thought I would be involved in, but at the same time I was humble enough and keen enough to kind of get my boots on and kind of get stuck in. And I have to say it's the best thing I'd ever done, because same again, some of the boys, like a Kerr Robertson, for instance, has obviously just recently left the club. Brilliant relationship with him. Another kid that come and obviously use my own academy. Lots of other parents that I still keep in contact with, and obviously a good eye on boys like Rory Wilson, lads that are obviously still doing really well in the game, Rocco Friel down at QPR. So a group that probably was a group that maybe never had the best reputation when I first got them, but one that I absolutely loved working with.
I think you touched on an important part as well. Every coach will go through that rejection at times, and it's just how you then take it on the chin effectively, and don't let your ego get too dented by it and kick on. Just to touch on your own academy a wee bit more as well, what's the focus in sessions with yourselves then? I know from my own background, I do one-to-ones as well, and I think people often misunderstand what they're actually there to do. So what would you say as you guys at KTA bring to player development then?
So the biggest thing we're passionate about is obviously, one, we want to try and create an environment that people enjoy coming to. I think that's first and foremost. It's great to have all these words that follow these academies effectively. Listen, we're a grassroots academy, somewhere for a safe haven really for players to come in and hopefully improve and develop. How we like them to do that, we like them to work hard, we like them to constantly have a ball at their feet. I think that sounds really simple and really basic, but I think the biggest ethos behind our academy is producing the basics for the kids: how they receive it, how they pass it, can they dribble, can they play with their head up, are they good at passing, are they good at shooting, all the basic things. Are they good at 1v1 defending, are they good at 1v1 attacking? Not so much set play stuff or position specific stuff, but more just a generalization. If I believe that you're better at dribbling and you're better at passing and your first touch is better, you've got better agility, you've got better balance, you're fitter, you're sharper, your brain's a wee bit more switched on, you're more alert, you're more alive, you're not daydreaming in the queue, you're more switched on to actually what's going on, you're taking in information. I know that sounds like a lot just thrown at you, and obviously just me rattling off some of the stuff that we believe in, but we obviously break that down at different rates and different times to depending on what type of kid you've got on the pitch. And that kid can be really basic, a beginner, and we give them as much love and support and as passion as we do some of the best kids in the country. We had kids on this morning that take your breath away, how good they are and the enthusiasm they've got and how hard they work and how desperate they are to get better, and they're playing at elite level, i.e. it's maybe the wrong word to be using for kind of 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, but they're probably some of the kids that are near the top of the tree in youth development. They are down the bottom, but then we move to potentially kids that are more starting out and maybe have the same dream that when they walk on the pitch and they see these older players that have maybe been in the academy for 4 or 5 years. So the voice is different, the detail slightly different. It's obviously the ball goes a bit slower, but it's not going slower for the kids, and I think that's a really important thing for kids, for coaches and for kids and for parents to be aware of, that just because you see it done like X off a 14, 15-year-old and then it looks a bit slower or a bit sloppy off a 10-year-old, I'm like, come on, man, have a look in the mirror. These are the things that you've got to expect. Oh, his first touch is a bit poor. I'm like, come on, he's 10. Do you know what I mean? That's why he's here, to get better at that. Do you know what I mean? So, albeit I'm probably as highly strung and as impatient at times, I think people would think I've got brilliant patience, but I'm really hard on them because I care. I see so many quotes, albeit some fluffy ones, but I see so many quotes online about people caring and being hard on you, and you should, relish the type of people because they really care. I suppose I'd like to think I'm one of the people. So really basic, really technical based, really fitness orientated as well. I believe that fitness is a huge thing in society. So when our kids come to my academy, I like them to really be stretched and challenged physically. But at the same time, I want them to enjoy it, because the harsh reality is if they don't enjoy it and get mum and dad's car, then they pay the bills, and unfortunately the kids won't want to come back. So we pride ourselves, really, me and Jordy, in trying to give the best tuition we possibly can. Just because I've played at the level I've played at, it gives me no given right to think that I should have kids, walking through the door and always giving us business. So I really appreciate every single one of them. I really appreciate the support that I constantly get through, whether it be youth fans or whether it be from, the parents that support their kids coming to the academy. So I'm really humbled that we have so many people that want to support us.
And I think it's nearly 10 years the academy's been going now, is that right?
I think we'll be 9 years come November and then 10 the following November, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm going to quote. I think so, So 8 years past November there, so we'll be 9 years past November, I think.
So in that time, how have you developed the offering for players?
So we've tried to be really rigid, and obviously our setup in the respect of the days that we do. Obviously, we've had to adapt that off of different roles that I've had, different roles that Geordie's had, but we've tried to always do it together. We've never hired external coaches. We've never grew and had sessions where if you hire within my academy, and just to be on record, I've got no problem with people having 20 staff or 30 staff or 500 staff or however many of these different academies have. I have total respect for anyone that's willing to go and do it. I'm not saying it's always right. I'm passionate about that as well. But at the same time, just because you played or you've done something else doesn't give you any given right to think that you're better than anyone else. So I think it's up to us to prove how good we are as coaches. I think people have to come and enjoy it, and that's what gets you regular business. That's what gets people talking about you. That's what gets people coming back. But I think that, sorry if I'm half waffling off the back of your question. Hit me with that question again.
So how have you developed the business in terms of
what
you
offer to players? So we've kind of adapted it a wee bit in the respect of we went through COVID, didn't we? Yeah. We had to go through COVID. There was restrictions when we come back, and I suppose COVID was not a good thing for us because the academy was going really well at the time, but it was a good thing in probably developing what we now call our private sessions. So obviously our groups were smaller, and we've done far more hours per week. Now we obviously have more kids, but we make it more efficient in time for getting some time ourselves. At one stage, me and Jordy were on the pitch for like 7-8 hours on a Sunday, doing like 4 or 5 kids per session. Now we can do that in 3 sessions. So we try and like our selling point for the private stuff, for the small group stuff that we do, is obviously me and Jordy taking the sessions, and we try and limit it to kind of 10 and 12 kids. Let's just say you come every single week, and all of a sudden your pal wants to come and he makes number 13. We would probably bring him. But if we got a random email and we were already sitting at 10/12, we would probably tell the person that we were full within that slot, but we could potentially get you next week or the next again, or so on and so on. Listen, without kind of priving too much into how we do it, but we certainly don't just take number after number after number for the sake of it. If you don't fit into the kind of days that we do, which is a Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, then unfortunately we don't offer any other days really. So we've got a contract up at Merchiston Castle School, which we've had for quite a few years, which is the community-based football stuff and the private stuff, which obviously I go in and do. We've had brilliant support for the schools, the local schools that continue to support me. We obviously do a community programme on a Wednesday for the primary school and the high school, which is something that I've been really passionate about. I've done that for, well, it'll come obviously 9 years come November. So, you know, stuff that you don't want a pat in the back for, but I genuinely don't, even though I'm saying it now. So it's like kind of making people aware of it. But I mean it in the respect of whether I don't say it or don't, I've done it in the rain, sleet, and snow for the last soon to be 9 years. And I have to say, some of the relationships that I built up with the kids in the time and seen them grow and develop as young people to now potentially leaving high school and going into different jobs, not so much football, but just actually building up that relationship with them and actually being able to pass them in a local Tesco's, knowing them for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years nearly, and having a conversation with them is as important in development for me as it is actually getting them better at football.
I'm very keen myself. It's always the person first before the player, and I agree. There is nothing better when you see them have the wee bits of they're growing up. But I was out this morning. One of the boys is saying about going to high school, and wow, I've been coaching him for 3 years, and that's mad because he's one of the weird ones in the group as well. So you wouldn't even think him going to high school, which is it's mad when they come away with wee bits like that. Obviously, then 2021, you decide it's time to get a go as a gaffer, and you end up at Kelty Hearts. How did Kelty go about attracting you to the role there then?
So obviously, it's funny how things kind of materialise. So I'd actually been offered when I first retired an opportunity to go and play for Kelty. I'd had Dean on the phone, who obviously I never really knew who Dean was at the time. I just knew he was obviously involved at Kelty. You do your homework quickly to ask who this guy is, and obviously he's the kind of guy that kind of put the money into Kelty. So I'd had a chat regarding being a player. This was obviously when I ended up leaving Hibs at the tail end of my career, just after 2016. I had a wee stint in my mate's team at Trinent for kind of a month to 6 weeks. But at that time, I had like quite a lot of player, coach, stroke, manager opportunities as kind of player manager at different clubs in the lower leagues. And I was quite keen on starting an academy, and I was probably scunnered a wee bit as a player, but really keen to do the coaching part, which I know is, how do I kind of word that right, in the respect of I wanted to really play longer, but I knew I couldn't. And then I didn't want to drop down too far the levels and then get frustrated and be a person that I wasn't. And that's, I've got total admiration and huge respect for part-time players. I always did have. I've watched Geordie at Musselburgh. I've probably watched Musselburgh more than Rangers and Hibs in the last however many years. So I don't think anyone, even my local pitch just up at Patty's Road there, I've watched Edinburgh United umpteen times. I constantly walk the dogs, watch them on Saturday morning. So I have a huge respect for these people that play part-time football. I wasn't as keen to be one myself. I found that transition difficult. So the coaching part was obviously the kind of next journey. And I'm waffling again to tell you as much as I can. Tell me that question again.
So how did
Kelty Hearts bit.
how
So
did
Dean,
Kelty get you there?
So the Dean part was obviously Barry was the manager. I was obviously I'd got up to the B team obviously at Rangers. Stephen was obviously the manager. That summer was a crossroads where Peter Lovencrantz had left. The academy was kind of not changing direction, but there was different people moving on. And obviously at that time B team, I was not naive to know that unless you might get unlucky because of the manager, because it's a horrible thing to be in where you end up becoming interim manager or caretaker for a game or two because the club asks you. And obviously I know different people have been that in the past. But I probably always felt that me as an individual, after I'd got to where I'd got to within the academy, I had to probably leave to try and prove to people or go on my journey to one day ultimately wanting to potentially go back. And same again, I'm not sitting here, I know what time of day it is, I'm not naive, I know that is an unbelievable role that is only in your wildest dreams you might ever be that one day. So I wasn't naive. I thought when I leave, I was comfortable to leave. I thought Kelty at the time, off the back of Barry, having a good chat with Barry, was probably a good opportunity for me, as good an opportunity in the lower leagues that would allow me to continue to do my academy, but also give me an opportunity with a good budget to try and put my own team together, to have my own ethos, to have my own standards, to have my own everything that I've worked hard for, to try and present working in different people's organisations, albeit my academy is my own, but working obviously under Craig and under the kind of academy philosophy through the training centre allowed me to kind of have even when I was a B team manager, you were probably working a wee bit under Stephen's remit and how they wanted to play, how they wanted to train. You're getting players, you're not getting players, they're picking players to play X, Y, or Z minutes, and you're kind of filling in the dots. So I felt I was equipped for what I had learned and where I was in my journey to have a go, really. And I, as you probably know, and people know me, I backed myself, really. So I was positive I could go and do a really good job at Kelty, and that would. I said to Jordy, and he'll tell you if he ever comes on a podcast, that we'll get a job one day. I don't know what it'll look like. I don't know where it'll be. I don't know what level it'll be. But when it comes now, I'm ready now. And I had been for a good year or two in my head that that opportunity come at. I always felt it was wrong to be employed by Rangers as an employee to ever ask for a job. So I've never ever asked for a job. When Dean picked up the phone to me, it was him picking up the phone to me. And the first thing I said to him is, I would be interested, but you'll need to pick up the phone to Craig Mulholland and ask for permission to speak to me. And the phone then went to Craig, and I said, listen, Craig, I've already spoke to Dean, but I'll speak to him and I'll keep you posted. He's like, are you interested? I was like, well, I'm not sure. I need to speak to people that I value, and obviously then eventually, cutting a long story short, come to the conclusion that it was time to have a go.
And obviously, the season you had at Kelty, you had an admirable record.
Is that all you're giving it, Admiral?
2 point admiral. Adjectives these days, Kev. Not I mean, you've got to be nice, mate. An admiral, what 2.11 points per game. What ultimately?
I would say that's better than Admiral.
It's no bad to be fair, mate. But you did have a decent budget for the league you were in, so I wanted to balance it out a wee bit. What ultimately led to you deciding that one season was enough for you?
Well, I suppose, listen, hindsight, if we all had hindsight, we would be perfect, wouldn't we? We would all be wonderful. So I thought at the time there was a wee bit disgruntlement between, obviously, us moving forward and one or two behind the scenes. That had been kept under wraps because the most important thing was winning League Two and trying to get the club as far as we possibly could in every competition that we were involved in. Which I think we tried to do that. By the way, supported by great people. It's a brilliant club, a great community club. But the top end of that, the decision makers, the money people are always obviously breathing down your neck really to want X, Y, or Z. And we were keen on staying, but potentially wanting a bit more money to be more, what could we say, competitive within a league that we're going to have Dunfermline, Hamilton, full-time teams that were probably equivalent to, you could argue, like a Hibs or a Hearts or an Aberdeen beating the Old Firm to the league. So you have the playoff system, which is brilliant for obviously lower league teams that might want to have a go, but year to year, like a smaller budget could win League Two because it's less competitive. A huge budget in the Championship, maybe even this year, looking at the way the teams are going, how competitive that Championship's going to be, and you might have half a dozen teams that are going to have a go. It could be money poorly spent, and then sometimes when the Championship, when it ends up getting won by 60, 65, 70 points, which has happened in recent years, maybe a team that come and put money where they wanted to put it and go and try and win the Championship might have been a good investment at the time. So listen, I ain't trying to be too clever, but there is loads of different factors that come into it. We felt that the profile that I had built as an individual, and I might be miles off it, but I think when you go and win a league and that's the type of teams that you want to have, and you want to be at the top ends of leagues and competing with the win trophies and have that type of profile as a young manager, the last thing I wanted to do was potentially be down at 8th, 9th and 10th in League One. I would have felt as though it would have undone a lot of our work, and I think Kelty did finish 8th, and I think John Potter probably done a really good job because budget-wise and and where they were at is probably not far off where they should have been finishing. But like us all, you have a low budget, you want to compete, you want to punch above that. I totally understand that. I just wonder how that would have looked for Kevin Thomson and for Geordie after you going and winning so much and building up such a big reputation in such a short spell, to then all of a sudden people. So if your budget was that huge in League Two, why is it not that big in League One? So that maybe gives somebody an understanding of maybe the budget wasn't as big as what people were thinking. And that's not me downplaying it. We had the biggest budget in League Two. But you're talking by 50 grand to some other teams, no 500 grand. Do you know what I mean? So all these kind of funny stories that go about, I think it doesn't actually make any difference to me. I feel sorry for the players and for the club, because it's East Kilbride are going through it just now. I obviously don't know Mick personally that well. Cy Ferry's a good mate of mine, and they should say the same. Budgets give you good opportunities. It gives you a chance to try and sign some of the best players, but best players come with big egos. Sometimes you're signing players that are playing at the wrong level and they expect too much, and the teammates that are then surrounding them, they get a bit narky at them because they're not as good as them. The ego can be difficult to manage. Boys have got jobs, the commitment's less, like all these things that come into it. So I don't think anyone, until they've had an opportunity to manage, whether you've got a good budget or a bad budget, should be too critical on actually how difficult a job it is.
No, to be fair, it's that time old one, and in Scottish football in general. Budgets are always spoke about, but sometimes are often misunderstood. That I know personally, having been involved at a junior level last few years, Johnson Borough go through the same thing. You've just said yourself, East Kilbride. Mick, at the end of the day, Mick and the guys have done a great job. I might have a better budget than some, but that you've still got to carry it out regardless of the money you've got. You've got to go and do the job, and they've managed to do the job. Even this season, Clydebank have went into the Lowland League as well, and our club who, to be fair, their background, they've kind of been slow and steady. Obviously, everybody knows their story, but they had a right go in the summer, and it's evidently helped them go and finish the job to get where they want to be in terms of taking that next step. So, no, I definitely agree with it. I think sometimes people make the mistake of overplaying the monetary side of the game. In terms of yourself, your playing career, you've been fortunate enough to work with some of the greats in the Scottish games when it comes to coaches, with guys like Parky and obviously Walter. What's been your biggest learning from them?
Well, the two people you just mentioned there are the first thing that comes to your mind is standards and discipline, really. Walter's somebody that everybody knows how highly I think of him, how much he helped my career, how much he kind of carved me into the individual that I am. Do you know what I mean? The class that he represents, the humility that he had as an individual, minus any of the tactical and the man management stuff that he had as part of being your manager. Just as an individual, as a person, was as classy and as respectful as you can get. Parky, albeit totally different from Walter, but the same morals, the same type of standards, the same discipline and probably infrastructure developing young people. Walter was obviously developing, the type of personalities that were good enough and robust enough to win leagues. But Parky was probably helping shape us as young players to try and stand in as good stead, that one day when we did bump into Walter, we would maybe have the right tools in our bags to be able to carry out what he wanted. So they would be two that minus any technical ability and tactical awareness that they both helped me get better at. I think just as a person, they were brilliant when it come to standards, and I adhere by them now. I do when I coach, the demands that I put on people, but also how I try and represent my life. I think Tony Mowbray was a huge part of obviously our young player's career. He was a kind of match made in heaven when it come to his, I hate the word philosophy, but his idea how to play football and how to coach. His methods were all technical and tactical on the training pitch, a lot of possession-based stuff, a lot of passing, but also a real good guy, a proper gentleman who, when we had a young changing room, probably needed that leadership within him. And then you go back to people like Bobby Williamson, who was brilliant. I still speak to Bob, gave all the young players opportunity, probably doesn't get the credit that he gets. And then without naming names, because I think I'm too long enough in the tooth for that, but the ones that you didn't particularly see eye to eye with, I suppose gave me good insights into, well, maybe if I've not quite liked that scenario as a player because I've been treated like this, hopefully that can stand me in good stead. If I end up maybe in a scenario where I might don't like Stevie and he's annoying me, I'll maybe treat him with a slightly different bit of respect than maybe at the time I felt I got treated or whatever. Or some of the arguments you maybe get into, you maybe take a wee back step and say, listen, I've already been there. I've experienced that. I know the outcome. It didn't. It was a no win for both parties. So let's maybe not cross that bridge. So I think when you think back to some of the ones that I've worked under, or all the ones that I've worked under, they've been a huge part in not just helping me become a better player and a better person, but also the way I live my life now, how I try and conduct myself in front of my kids, and how I'd like them to be young men. I just had one of my mates at the academy today, and his wee boys in on Friday, but his other wee boy started for his first session on Sunday, and the message that I got was meant. And by the way, I could strangle my pair at times, but you should be proud of your two lads. They're a credit to obviously you and the missus, because obviously they're polite to the parents. They speak, they help get the kit in, and I know that might be not everybody's cup of tea, but it's really important to me, and that's what matters.
No, at the end of the day, if you've got standards, it's always noticed, I think, and how you carry yourself as a person. And it's very important throughout life, whether it be on a pitch or off a picture. I always think it's a massive thing. Daft wee things in it for coaches as well. See the kids that get in, pick up the cones at an end of a session, things like that. You remember them because
Invaluable,
aye, absolutely. Future wise, then, Kev, what's your hopes for the future?
Well, listen, obviously when I'm doing this, I'm obviously still contracted to the club, so I've not had much dialogue, obviously, with the kind of new ownership. So the boys were due to start obviously today. The staff were back in. My contract finishes on the 30th of June, so I would never like to speak out of turn because obviously, listen, how much I appreciate the club and how much I love the place. So as it stands, I've obviously not had too much dialogue, but at the same time, there's far bigger fish and far more important things for the club to deal with. So it's certainly not about me, and I'm certainly down near the bottom of the list. It would be nice to have some sort of conversation in time whenever that time comes. But at the moment, kind of a wee bit in limbo to say, and I'll just kind of bash on. I'll keep on doing the academy, and if the phone goes and there's that opportunity to speak to someone, then brilliant. If there's not, then I'm not quite sure how it works nowadays when your contract gets to the end and it expires, and that's just you. Do you just say hi and bye? Do you send an email? Do you go and give everybody a cuddle, or do you just send a WhatsApp message nowadays and say thanks? But listen, I've loved being back in it. Well, I've loved being back in the club. Obviously, only for February until kind of third week in May, and Stevie Smith was brilliant with me. Obviously, a friend of mine, but probably not had much kind of collaboration obviously over the years with different. He was just kind of starting part-time just as I was moving on, but obviously always kept in touch, and brilliant teammate, great lad, and he does a brilliant job for the club, supported by loads of other good staff, without going through them all. But met some real good people, and I have to say the group working, not just the kids that we were working with, albeit it was a wee bit of disappointing season in the end regarding obviously Hibs winning the league, and prior to obviously me going back, they'd been knocked out of the Youth Cup. So I think Stevie would be the first to say that they obviously wanted to achieve far more. I think the quality within the group probably should have achieved more, but at the same time, we both echo, and all the staff, that the most important thing is trying to help get players to the first team. But I think aligned with that, young Rangers team should be winning, especially when you get to the top end of the academy. I think it's the DNA of the club is winning. It's really important, and I don't think you should be embarrassed to talk about winning when you get to the top end of the academy. So I think when you want to create that type of robustness and that type of winning mentality, I don't think you should ever shy away from it. So, but for me as an individual and personally, all the staff, physios, doctor, sports science, support staff, goalkeeper coach who's become a good mate of mine, Big James, but even Connor, who obviously spent a bit less time in the academy because he was supporting the first team. I have to say they've all been brilliant with me and reached out to me obviously over the summer. So if I get opportunity to go back, I'll be delighted. If I don't, I'll always be a fan of the club, and hopefully the opportunities going back in and maybe doing a bit of TV work or some of the match days or whatever, or even maybe Stevie might get me on his podcast one day if I'm lucky enough.
Well, fingers crossed, mate. I know going by Twitter, I won't be the only one to say this, but personally, I would like to hope that a Rangers coaching staff has a Kevin Thomson in there at some point. Going to finish up with some quick fire questions now. I've got 3, and then the wee bit at the end is I want you to pass one on for the next guest. All right. So we'll go through these, mate, but more coaching focus. So, what's your favourite practice to run?
Some sort of combination passing drill that's quickly changes into like different directions, multiple runs. I love 1 and 2 touch stuff. I love getting the ball zipping about. So we always start with some sort of technical type stuff. Less so rondo possession based type stuff. I like that type of stuff, but that would be drill kind of 2, drill 3, kind of getting closer to teamwork stuff, if you know what I mean. I love starting. I love seeing the ball getting zipped about the pitch, and obviously naturally when you've got the pitches that the training centre have got and the groundsmen, like Goody and Big Scotty, etc. When they've got the pitches as good as they have, then there's no excuse not to pass the ball.
I know wee Scott well, mate. He'll be absolutely buzzing that he's just getting him.
That's the bit that's important for me there, and I genuinely mean this. I've had Goody's wee boy through the academy. He's become a good friend of mine. But like Big Davey, obviously at Ibrox, they were the natural ones that I'd obviously spoke to a wee bit more because they're on the pitches. But whether it be Caroline in the kitchen, or Alex serving it, helping the food, or Gail always picking up after you, that's why the club's important, because of these people.
No, absolutely, mate, absolutely. Who's the coach you most admire?
Just in world football, or
can be past or present, mate.
Listen, it's hard to get away from Pep, isn't it? But I'd always had a soft spot for Man United when I was a kid, kind of growing up. They were my kind of dad's team, really, and he went through where it was like, he used to always tell me to watch Mark Hughes, and Mark Hughes, even though he was an amazing player, wasn't quite the one that used to catch my eye. I kind of got to the kind of Giggsy and Lee Sharp, and obviously then the next generation of your kind of Beckhams, etc. I kind of quite liked the mavericky type standout players when I was younger. Probably less so when I started to understand football, and not that they're not brilliant players. But I think coaching wise, one of my favourites at that time, where I was a football player, obviously, and I was lucky enough to play against his team when we played in the Emirates Cup, was Arsene Wenger. Because obviously what I'm passionate about is youth development. I think he changed that. When you think of some of the young players that come through at Arsenal, probably doesn't get enough credit for that. Listen, I know they all also buy players in, and they spent a lot of money on players that maybe join the academy later on in the day, rather than potentially being local London lads. But I just think his kind of style and the way he played football, and when they were at their brilliant best, they were brilliant to watch. And I think same again falls into the Walter Smith, albeit he had an edge, and some of the bust-ups that he had with Sir Alex over the years were always great to watch. But I just think he was a class act, how he spoke and how he conducted himself. And I think he kind of changed a wee bit of the narrative when it come to how English teams played for a long period of time. And you could argue Pep's maybe took that to a different dimension and a different level. But Arsene Wenger would be one that I like going back, and he does a lot of podcast stuff now and kind of studio stuff, and sits and talks about youth development and that stuff. So he's one that I always like to keep an eye on.
He was very much somebody that revolutionised the British game as well. When you think of how standards changed in terms of nutrition, or the different wee bits that came in with that Invincibles group that he then goes to take on as well. So don't get me wrong, he had big battles with Sir Alex, but I think his biggest battle was that zip on his jacket. Player wise, mate, now this always a hard one to answer as a coach, but who would you say is the best player you've coached?
The best player I've coached? Oh, well, listen, I've been really, really fortunate when you get back to the training centre, obviously, and when you get to B team level, you get. I've had Graham Dorrans for a couple of sessions on my pitch. Your Greg Stewart's, your Jordan Joneses, Brandon Barker's, albeit they might not wanted to be on my pitch because they were maybe part of the group that Stephen had maybe got a wee bit annoyed at the time. But obviously invaluable for me as a young coach to, Big Kel Lafferty's, etc., coming over and being able to like have that relationship with them as ex-teammates, but also now they're on your pitch and you're saying, listen, I expect you to train and set a level and a demand that I'm telling them what it looks like next door. I expect you to then show that when you're on my pitch. So to have the type of guys come over and give you the time of day, really, and show you the respect, I think adds massive stripes onto into your locker, really, for then the young players to think, well, like, these boys respect them and kind of going out their way to speak. I just think it's a nice accolade to have, really. Obviously, I've had Leon Kings, I've had Pattersons, all the boys, obviously, guys I'll obviously know, but I'm going to flip it and say he's obviously not the best player, but we had Michael Tidser, obviously, Callum Higginbottoms, boys that have still become good friends of mine, even though I was a manager. I just met Big Jordan Foster walking the dog the other day. Another person I had a good relationship with, obviously being a young player at Hibs. I looked after him when I was an older player. Him being a young player breaking through. And then obviously one day I'm obviously working for me at Kelty. But Jamie Burjonas is a player that I think he's got, and he's not going to have the career that obviously lots of others I've coached have potentially had. And hopefully there's a few young ones that are still to come through the pipeline that might go on and have wonderful careers, hopefully. But as a person, as a player, as someone that was invaluable to me and gave me the trust as a young manager, coming from a club like Rangers, being part of the first team squad, had made his debut, was on a decent enough contract as a young player to give me the trust to drop to League Two without any negotiation. I told him what we could pay. He said he would sign. It was far, far less than what he was leaving for. It was also really brave of him to do what he'd done for the fact that he was a Rangers player and he should have had better offers. He should have been able to stay further up the leagues. But for him, I think if you were to ask Jordy, and by the way, I'm not saying he was the best player for Kelty. I'm not downing any of the lads that were there because they were all terrific. Your Joe Cardills, I loved them all to bits. I told them that on a regular occurrence. It's one of my party lines as a coach. I do care. I think it's really important that they know that you care. But Barjo is, I think, no matter how far I get in coaching and no matter how many players I coach, he will always be up near the top of my list as someone that I'll be forever indebted to just how good he was at Kelty and how much he helped us.
To be fair, Barger was one that I thought at the time, because he had chances in the first team and you seen him, and he never ever looked. He never looked like somebody that was out his depth. We kind of had a wee spare of players like that between Jamie and then Stephen Kelly as well, was similar that you didn't see, but it was the joys at that time. It's Stephen Gerrard's a gaffer. Especially when it comes to midfielders, what does he want? How do you break that door down? It seemed to be that we had ones that just couldn't quite get through.
Listen, it's so difficult, and I think Barge will be honest and say at one stage he probably thought he was there or thereabouts. And as you mentioned, like, I'm only going off the tip of my tongue, like your Ryan Jacks, your Glenn Camaras, you know what I mean, your Joe Rebos, like players that he was trying to break into at the time to get through. Was obviously really difficult, but I know he's just signed for Airdrie. He is also one of the type of players that I think is suited by certain styles. He'll be the first to admit it. I used to do it as part of my team talk. It was part of how we played, that we had to compensate for. He's maybe not the best without the ball. He's a bully, a boy, but just his personality, loved him to bits. I still remember like it was yesterday when he broke his arm against Bucky Thistle in the Scottish Cup. We were planning on taking him off, 4-0 up, gets to the byline, boy shoves him a wee bit, accidental, slips, hand into the board, breaks his hand, operation. And I think even hurt my own legs. I've never been as sick as I was losing a player, because that's how much I cared about him. I cared about him like he was my own kid. But brilliant boy, and just grew to have a brilliant relationship with him, and one that I thought for my early coaching career, when you think you go, and he was not quite my first signing, I think he was maybe second or third, but he was one of the first guys that when I left and got the job had WhatsApp me. I got loads and loads of brilliant messages through. I might have not got one or two. I could probably name them, but I think if there was 50 lads within the full-time academy, I think I at least got 45 to kind of 48 lovely messages on WhatsApp when I obviously did leave to go to Kelty, and I suppose that gives you confidence as an individual. But Barjo was one of the ones that I think if I achieve hopefully some of my dreams as a young coach, and you never know what's around the corner in football, but he'll always be one that I think back to being extra special for our time, obviously, at Kelty. And listen, we had boys like Connor Barron, obviously, at Kelty. the whole squad were different class to us. I still see Big Dougie Hill, who was at the different end for Barjo, he stays just round the road from me, and they all still laugh and joke about how special a year it was. So, that gives me great confidence, and it just makes me feel good about myself, really, that these guys, had long, industrious careers, maybe at different levels or whatever, but still think back to that year that we had them at Kelly.
And the last bit, mate, is more where I pass it to you. So I'm looking for you to give me a question for the next guest.
Well, I got a question. I got a question that obviously it'll be football related. So the question when I done the BBC yesterday for Kenny McIntyre and Frank was one thing you would change in Scottish football, and that's obviously your traditional like VAR or refereeing or the format of the leagues or the distribution of commercial money, etc., etc. But my one was I would change how professional clubs support grassroots. And I would, whether that be a can of worms in the respect of, I don't know off the tip of my tongue, I don't know the ins and outs, but I don't just mean monetary support, I mean coaching support. I know the SFA have these pilot type courses that coaches sometimes get paid to go into grassroots coaches and to hit support grassroots coaches. I just think there could be so much more done. I also think that it wouldn't be a bad duty of care if there was somebody that governed grassroots kids allowing to play with their grassroots clubs right up until they're like 13, 14 years of age, and it would give them the maximum opportunity playing pro academy and having the games fixture program that might be a real challenge and stretch for them, but it would also give them the opportunity to have fun and play. And if you are just thinking of one of my boys, a real wee technical player that might struggle as he gets a wee bit older physically, it would give him that opportunity to maybe get more opportunities on the ball, more touches, a safeguarding environment where it's a wee bit less cutthroat. And I know that contradicts me a wee bit in the respect to, like, I've spoke about creating a robust and difficult environment for the young Rangers players because that's the avenue that they're on to get to the Rangers first team. There has to be a wee bit cutthroat nature within it. It's natural. But I do think when the kids are, I hear kind of pro academies bringing them in at like 6-7-year-old nowadays, which is great for the kids. As long as the parents are obviously educated in the right way that your kid at 6 isn't the best player in the world and he's not going to play for Rangers potentially. But to have that dream and get that extra tuition at that young age and get early touches on the ball, 100%. But I also think it's really important how we present that and portray it to the parents and to the kids. And obviously that safeguarding environment where you're not having kids in at 8, 9, 10-year-old and releasing them after 6 weeks and then all of a sudden the world come crashing to an end and they didn't want to go and play with their pals anymore. And I think we could, and I'm saying we because I should be part of that, and I do, and I would take responsibility, is that I think it's not a bad thing if we could, if I could change one thing, it would be something that I would be really passionate about having a hand in. So that would be my question to your next guest. If there was one thing you could change in Scottish football, what would it be?
Top man, mate. Top man. Thanks very much, Kev. You've been excellent with your time, mate.
Pleasure, mate.
Really enjoyed this chat.
Thanks for having us on.
Some man, mate. Thank you.
Yeah,
and that's us for episode 1, folks. Personally as well, I'd just like to say thanks to Stevie for giving us a platform for trying something different in terms of this coach's corner. Hopefully we get a few more guests lined up in the next couple of months and we can see where it goes for here.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show.